Welcome to another episode of Art and Soul, and this episode is called I Am a Part of Something Bigger, featuring James Sampliner. Help our community grow by subscribing to our YouTube channel, sharing and liking this episode, and following the Art and Soul podcast on Instagram and TikTok. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Art and Soul. I am Matthew Johnson Harris, and this is a special place where we explore the intersection of making art and spirituality. Now, if you've been watching, you know that I start every episode with a centering mantra, our affirmation that guides us through the whole episode. So, today's mantra and affirmation is, I am a part of something bigger. I am a part of something bigger. So I want you to take a deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, and just sit with that. I am a part of something bigger. Today, I am so blessed to have my friend, a mentor, one of the smartest, funniest, shadiest people that I know, James Sampliner. How are you, love?
I'm good, my friend. Thanks for having me.
Oh my goodness. We have had so many conversations that I have left feeling so enriched, a greater sense of myself, and also challenged to not only be a more deliberate and intentional artist, but also a more deliberate and intentional human being. And I'm so thankful for you. I am so blessed that I am at a place now to where I have so many people that I can call on for questions, and I'm landing in rooms where I can also have people that I can lean on, because this career, once you start getting to a higher level, can be very isolating.
Yeah.
And it can feel like once you've finally crossed over the gate where all the gatekeepers were in the front of the gate, you kind of are like left to your own devices to figure out how it works. But then there's people that are so loving and so open and so caring and so generous like you. And I'm so thankful for you, honestly.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Okay. You hold so many hats. You've done so many different things.
Yeah.
We're working on a show now, The Preacher's Wife, where you literally are holding like 15 hats.
Yeah, many hats.
You're doing so many things on the show.
There's a fedora, there's a straw. Yeah, there's a lot of hats. A wool cap.
Yes.
You know, yes.
But for the people who are outside of the art world that might be listening and watching this, it's hard for them to break down the difference between what a composer is, a songwriter is, and an orchestrator. Now, you have been a person that has done all of those things, but I want to specifically talk to you about orchestrations, because I feel like that role specifically is overlooked a lot, and a lot of people don't understand what it means to do orchestrations on a musical.
Sure.
So can you give like a general explanation of what that is?
Yeah, I mean, the orchestrator is the person who essentially takes a composer's song, which is structured, right? A song has a melody, it has rhythm, and it has harmony. And a song basically is, in the theater, it's supposed to further the narrative. So my job as an orchestrator is to take like a piano part that a composer might have come up with and flesh it out for an orchestra full of musicians. And the way that works is that using colors of different kinds of instruments, whether it's reeds, whether it's brass, whether it's strings, or whether it's the rhythm section, meaning guitar, bass, keyboards, drums, percussion, I start to envision a world that the characters live in where the orchestra no longer is just like a classical orchestra, where you go to Geffen Hall, let's say, you see the Philharmonic play Beethoven, and Beethoven as a composer was also an orchestrator, because that back in the day was how you composed. You heard sounds and you wrote for certain groups of instruments, and that's what was presented. In the theater, I look at the story first, and I'm looking at the progression of the characters as they pass through the story, and I think, what colors support this moment? What colors support a journey even within a song? How do I help to color the audience's experience without them actually knowing what I'm doing? They inherently feel it. And the orchestrator, if they're good at their job, it becomes kind of a wash. It becomes seamless, because the character almost disappears into the music. Sometimes the character pops out of the music so that music, the orchestration for the instruments lays a bed for them to walk over and pronounce their truth in that scene. And that's essentially what I do in a kind of metaphorical state, right? In a more specific musical state, it's about making choices about the composer's wishes harmonically, musically, rhythmically, what makes and drives a song, what makes and gives the song that feeling that they want to see in a musical. So, and this goes true for if I'm doing film, it's true if I'm doing TV, and it's true if I'm doing records too, especially for singers. You know, instrumental music's a little different, but for singers, I'm always very conscious of what is the listener taking away from it? What am I doing kind of subliminally to give the listener some sort of bed to really feel? Not just the singer. I think a lot of, especially in today's climate, a lot of focus has been put on the singers, whether they sing high, whether they have tone, whether they're straight tone, vibrato, like all of that stuff. But they forget the part about production. They forget the part about what's supporting the singer to make you feel stuff. And you can go into pop music, you can go into theater music, but it's always the same, which is that the producers are always the ones that don't exactly get the glory because what they're doing is they're choosing colors. A lot of my friends who are in my generation, in Gen X, don't really understand current pop music because they're like, where is the melody? And I'm like, that's not what the kids are, that's not how they intrinsically listen to music, pop music these days. Especially when they're teenagers. They listen for groove and they listen for beat and they listen for like blips and bleeps and stuff. And those things are attracting them to a song. Later, as they grow into life, they start to discover people like Joni Mitchell, and their minds are just, they're like, how can she do so much with so little? A lot of that is orchestration or arranging, you know, so that you have colors that allow you to start to feel. That's my job, is to take colors of instruments from all over. In The Preacher's Wife, there is a palette of colors that I'm using that represent the wide extremities of theater music. So, for instance, there's Golden Age theater music like Kander and Ebb. There's contemporary musical theater like Jason Robert Brown. There's in between like Sondheim or Andrew Lloyd Webber. There's modern stuff with R&B music, and now we're putting in gospel orchestrations in a show coming straight from the actual church language. So there's a wide swath of colors that I have at my disposal, and my job is to figure out how to make one complete whole from these many different parts that Tituss has written in this score.
And what's so beautiful, you said so many things that I could have jumped on at any point, because there is so much individuality in all of the different components that you bring together. Like a trumpet can't do what a saxophone does, even though they're both in the same horn section, right? And then you have to be the person that kind of facilitates like what will make a trumpet special here as opposed to a saxophone.
Correct.
And I think that opens us up to the greater conversation of like, you are a part of something bigger in general in life, right? Knowing what your individual gifts are, how can you add that individual gift to a bigger idea or humanity, right? Looking at what you have to offer. But it takes a very special person to sit and to magnify people's gifts or magnify what makes them great or what instruments will really shine here, and then put them together to create something beautiful.
Correct.
So orchestrators are in a beautiful way, not only the people that find the intersection, but can also find peace within what could be madness.
For
right?
sure.
You find the peace within all of the madness.
Yeah, order from chaos, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for
exactly.
sure.
And then what I also like that you brought up is that The Preacher's Wife, and this is not just because we're both in this show, we're just promoting it, but the score really is the most diverse musical theater score that I've ever seen. Like there is so many, not just colors, but like so many different types of music represented, but it's all presented so authentically while also being a part of something that is uniform, which can be really, really hard to do.
Absolutely.
And the fact that y'all been able to do it in a way to where not only is the music so diverse and so different from one another, in that individualness is going to bring so many different types of people together to enjoy the experience that normally wouldn't, which I think is so beautiful about this piece.
Yeah, that's what I'm hopeful for. But I think, to your point, one of the hard things about a musical sometimes is that you get one tone, and sometimes you go to see a piece and you leave there and you think, well, that was a fine show, but there was something about it, and sometimes you can't clock it, especially if you're not, let's say, savvy to the details, the fine details of things. And you think to yourself, why wasn't I feeling more, or why wasn't I taken on a bigger journey? And sometimes it's because the material just kind of sits in one place. And this is one where genre of the whole show is not defined. The show is the thing. And I always like that the most. I like when a story is the thing and the music can be different things for different moments. Yeah? So like in Legally Blonde's a really good example, which is one of my favorite shows that I've done. And it's the kind of thing where when Larry O'Keefe presented me the score, I couldn't believe how many styles of music were in this thing. But they were so informed by the scene, the character, and the moments, top down, right? And so by being in Harvard, everything got like very austere. But being in the sorority, it became pop music. And the way that Larry kind of wove that into the story is very much on par with the way that I think about storytelling anyway. So it was like a marriage made in heaven. And I love pieces that use different forms of music to illuminate and shine light on the bigger picture, being the story.
Yes, and Legally Blonde came out when I was in high school. And I remember listening to that cast recording and being so captivated by it. But what I realized is that I was so attracted to it because as a person who feels like I lived in so many different worlds, like there's a part of me that really just loves musical theater, Broadway, right? Then there's a part of me that really just loves the radio.
Sure.
Like I live in between the worlds of Stephen Sondheim and Beyonce every day.
Absolutely.
Right? Like that's just kind of who I am.
Yeah.
And I didn't even clock it. After we had a conversation one night, I was hanging out at your house. I went home and I re-listened to Legally Blonde and I texted you about some things that I had heard differently now.
Yeah.
And there was a breakdown in positive, the rap breakdown in positive, and I clocked it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that is why I was so attracted to it. Because I saw myself authentically represented in that hip hop moment.
Yeah.
Because what you were able to do with orchestrations.
Yeah. Well, Chris Yonke actually did those, but I did the arranging
Other
with Larry.
arrangers,
Yeah. It kind of leads me to my next thing that I wanted to tell you, which is that I am very atypical of a music director in New York in the sense that I come from being a musician first, as opposed to having training in the musical direction art. I didn't go to school for music directing for the theater. There's a lot of kids that are coming in that there are programs now that do that, but that wasn't me. I was a musician first. And so by saying that, that means that I was open to listening to so many things that were influencing me through my life, be it Latin music, be it world music, be it radio stuff, be it, pop music, be it jazz, classical, just like all forms and aspects of music were coming into these ears. And so I never kind of like put my career in a box. I always tell people that I'm not a theater artist first, I'm a musician first. Theater is my career, music is my life. So there's a big thing that like my influences that go into my orchestrations come from the things that I've gleaned over the years that I've listened to. And so I find that those influences make for better choices, more interesting choices when I start to put pen to paper and figure out who's playing what are the textures, what are the colors. It's all of those experiences that I've had through my life that have informed the way that I orchestrate or the ideas that I bring to the table to allow the story to breathe, but also to give the audience something to really lock into.
And I'm gonna go even further in describing you. I know that you said that like you bring in all of these different influences from music that have helped you become who you are. But I think also what makes you such a great artist is that you are a citizen of this planet. Like, you just love culture. You want to learn about as many cultures as you can. You want to travel to as many places as you can.
Amen.
And because of that, you are able to share so many different types of humanity through your work that people are always feeling seen, right? So I think that is just who you are as a human, that like you're gonna learn about as much music as you can. I'm talking to the audience and you at the same time. But James has been very helpful in guiding me and helping me expand just my view of the world and my need to travel, and how that will help me expand not only how I tell stories, but also have a deeper understanding of my place in this world. And there's been so many amazing places that you have traveled. But is there any place that you have traveled that you think has really had an impact on you as an artist?
There's two that come to mind straight away. The first is Bali. Because when I was coming up, probably in my teens, so this is back in the late 80s, I was starting to get influenced by the music of Philip Glass and Steve Reich. And it was the kind of thing, because I lived here in New York and grew up here in New York, the New York art scene downtown was very influential to the way that I started to think about art and the different ways that like contemporary minds could shape things that I thought I knew and change it into something completely different. Meaning, I grew up around the Beatles and Mozart and ballet and opera, and my parents would take me to the Met and New York City Ballet, and I would see all the things, but what they never kind of opened me up to was that there was a new kind of movement underneath that there were other people doing other things. And one day I was in a library in Greenwich, Connecticut, and I picked up a record album to take out that just had mallets on the front of it, and I was a percussionist, a budding percussionist, brand new, and I thought, well, this has mallets on it, so I should probably listen to that. And it was a piece by Steve Reich called Drumming. And I was like, well, it's all in the title, so let's get that. So I did, and I took it home, and my whole world broke open, because the music was hypnotic, pulsing, textured, layered, and very kind of serene. And I'd never in my life heard textures like this. And so as I was going through my life and learning about Steve's work as a composer, his influences went from Ghana and the kind of circle drumming and the griots of Western Africa to gamelan music in Bali. Now, I haven't been to Africa, at least that part of Africa yet. That's a big, big trip that I need to make for at least a month. But where I did end up is in Bali, because I was in Japan doing a show. And after that show was done, I thought, well, I'm on this side of the world, so I might as well go to Bali. Everybody tells me it's super spiritual, and I should go. And when I got off the plane, the first thing I got was the humidity, which for me, as an American New York Jew, is like, why are we doing this? Why is there so much stickiness in the air? Then you get used to it after a day or two. But the second thing that I felt was the moment I left the airport and got into a cab and drove through the Capitol. It was like a completely spiritual world. And I knew that I was going to try to experience Balinese music, which is the gamelan orchestra. And that was the music that inspired Steve Reich, which then inspired me. So it's kind of getting to a root of mine, not roots, but like a root of mine. I have many roots. But this was one that I really needed to kind of dive in. And what ended up happening was my tour guide that I had for a week, basically when I told him what I wanted to do, he carved out different stops on the island for me to go and meet craftsmen who make the instruments, musicians who play the instruments, and then go see events where they actually perform it in front of me. And that split my head straight open. It literally was one of the most defining moments of art in my life, because the art and culture in Bali, very similar to Brazil, very similar to basically any third world country or any country that's not Western European. Art and culture do not have a separate box. They are one and the same. They are, capoeira is a great example of this, because capoeira is dance, it's martial art, and it's regular art. And they do it on a beach in Brazil, right? And it's at once completely hypnotic and completely athletic and completely soul-filling. Art and culture are mixed. We do not have that in the West anymore. We kind of did for a little bit way back, but ever since kind of the rise of colonialism and other kind of Western influence on the rest of the world, we don't see the kind of mix of art and culture in the way that these other cultures have it. We have art and culture mixed in the Western world in a way that's popular, and we are kind of like assaulted with it, in the media, that we are told to like this kind of music, and we're told to like this kind of movie, and we're told to like this kind of art, and that doesn't happen a lot over there, at least in the traditional sections of that culture. Brazil, they weave in guitars into their meals, like they have singing along while they're cooking, and it's just the art is an extension of the culture as opposed to defining the culture.
I need to pause. Okay, because that's a big one, right? Because we have this program and we're calling it Art and Soul, and we're talking about returning to oneself. And until we get to a place to where we really center ourselves in the idea that art is just an ever-present thing that vibrates on its own frequency, that is just a part of life, as opposed to like this idea, and I've never heard someone articulate it as beautifully as you just did, but in America, we really are kind of told what to like. The record labels push specific artists, right? Those people get specific promotions, and like, to go. And also what I love, I'm going all over the place, because everything you said was so great, but the fact that you knew that you needed to have this like homecoming to yourself to understand one of these roots of why you do what you do is something that I want every artist that is listening to this or to watch this, like, really get a deeper sense of intentionality behind your growth outside of the idea that I'm growing for this award, I'm growing for the opportunity to possibly I'll get good enough and I'll be like a Broadway composer. How about I'm just growing to get a deeper understanding of why I love doing this? And I love that you did that. You were like, I need to figure out like, what is the root of drumming? What is the root of this? Like, what ancestral connection that this has? Because if I can get to the root of that, I can find a centered joy and authenticity in it that doesn't need any type of validation.
Correct. That's absolutely right.
That's huge. And that you internally do that on your own. You internally do that work on your own in a culture that always says that you should always be growing to achieve. As opposed to growing to actually just, be meeting yourself every time you grow.
It's a very hard thing to get out of the zeitgeist that's around you, that's telling you that you must and you have to and you need to, and all of those things. The outside pressures are constant, especially here in New York, because of the pace and the demand of art being at a very high level here in the city. There's always that outside pressure to think, am I good enough? Like, where am I going? But I've learned over the last 25 years or so that, like, when I stop listening to the outside voices and start to just focus on what is actually making me feel purposeful and with a direction, all of a sudden, the art just flows out of me with little to no effort. I don't hit those proverbial walls the way I used to in my late 20s and 30s, where I was like, everything I write has to be a banger. Everything I put to paper or put on wax or whatever needs to be a banger, because like that's my legacy. And I'm like, legacy is just such a it's such a hard thing to talk about, because I don't really think about it anymore the way I used to when I was a kid, where I was like, oh, how am I going to leave the world? Like, what am I going to leave the world? That was always a big thing when I was coming up, was like, I have to just keep focusing on this because I have to leave something behind.
This is in no way to name drop anybody, but you've worked with so many icons in this industry. I could see how that could be a natural instinct.
Yeah.
And you grew up around them too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like you're hanging
course.
out with these big producers, these big songwriters, these big performers, right?
Yeah.
That the most natural thing in your mind to be is like, I want to achieve at least some of that.
Yeah.
Or if I don't like move the needle a little bit further than they did, why am I here?
Yeah. I think a lot of it too is my heroes, you know, when I still have moments when I listen to things from my heroes that are 50, 60 years old, and I'm like, it's still fresh today, and I'm like, why can't I do that? I want to make things that when you hear it 20, 30, 40 years from now, I'm long gone, that you really feel like it's timeless. I mean, I feel like one of the great things about great art in general, but great music in particular, is that you can listen to something from an X generation or X period of time, and when it touches you, it just touches you. Because there is no bad or good music. Music touches people in a way that is, it's languageless. It's its own thing. And so you come to it with some kind of understanding of where you've been, and you don't know where you're going, but you're putting it in the framework or the context of where you've been when you're listening to it. You're not coming to it with a sense of like regular language where things are good and bad or things are black and white or gray. And like, I think that music has that power. Here's a great example. One of the people that I cannot believe is existing on this earth while we're on this earth is the very, very talented multi-instrumentalist and composer Jacob Collier. And he's been doing this thing over the last 2 years since COVID where he's conducting the audience as a choir. Like he gives one section a pitch, then he gives another section a different pitch, and then a third another pitch. And he starts to conduct them while they're in the audience, and he just moves his hands, and they do this beautiful choral music for 5-10 minutes. It's a shared experience that no one's ever been able to capture, ever. And somehow he's able to kind of have that. And the people that have been at those shows have been changed forever because they cannot believe how every person in that room has a different opinion, a different background, a different racial profile, a different, you know, approach to art or what they like. And yet in that moment, in that very singular moment, here's 5,000 people singing as one. And he's magically conducting it from nothing. It's that part of music that's languageless and perfect. And that's why I feel so akin to music and why I feel that the culture, when you allow that part of it to come through, there's no good or bad music. There's the music that moves you, and there's the music that you run to when you're in a certain, you know, good or bad, certain state of mind. And that, I think, is the power of what I do.
I ask every guest when they come on this show, because you've already kind of answered it by that beautiful, gorgeous, articulate painting of that picture. But I ask every guest, is there any part of your process, though, that feels innately spiritual? Like you were talking about the spiritual nature of music and how it reaches people. But like, is there any part of your process when you sit down and you're looking at a piece of music or you're orchestrating that feels spiritual to you?
Everything. Every single moment. From the moment I'm about to start a project, even before I start the project, when the piano score is given to me, when a song is given to me in its raw demo form, the moment I start thinking about that thing, I just meditate and let the spirit guides like come in. And there are many, because I'm an improvisatory musician, meaning that my greatest joy is to be able to sit at a single piano in a room and just play. And just from nothing create stuff as the spirit is moving me. So spirituality is a great part of the way that I write, because I have to be open enough to let the universe and its various forms of information in. I have to be able to be a conduit for that. And I can't be selective because I want to write like this today or I want to be like this today. That's not going to affect the way that I make change in my own profession. The way that I feel I can do that is just allow the moment to breathe inside me and have those influences start to inform me about well, you could go this way or you could go that way. Then I start to improvise and try different things, try different ideas, try different lines for a flute or a clarinet or a sax or whatever, and see what happens. And so my orchestration process is a lot different from many in the sense that I like to orchestrate inside the program Logic on the computer.
Yeah.
And I have a ton of sample libraries that I use as my colors that are either imitating acoustic instruments or they're synthesizers that I know how to program. And so I start to play with all of that and find colors that blend well together. But that's all coming from the spiritual side of things. I'm a big disciple of the John Coltrane School of Music, which is just allowing that Eastern Buddhist philosophy to come into my own. Even though I was raised Jewish, I'm a spiritual Jew. And so I believe that there is a bigger world with so many different influences from teachings that should influence the way we live our lives, right? And so each religion has a creation story. Each religion has something based around the idea of things you should do and things you shouldn't do. But the difference can be about whether the self is important or whether the larger picture is important. And sometimes those things kind of can coexist, right? Because you're here, you're living, so there's a bigger picture. But then how are you making yourself better? So that's the individual. And so I take from those things to inform my own spirituality, and then that informs my art. What are the things that I really kind of adhere to in my day-to-day? I'm not murdering people, so that's pretty good. And I'm not coveting anything, so that's pretty good. I don't believe in awards. They're lovely to put on the wall or on the shelf, but I don't believe in them. I think that they're political and they don't make me a better artist. They're just there, and it's fun, and but there are things that, each one of those disciplines brings something to the table because there are different angles, there are different ways to look at the same thing, right? If you look at a sculpture just from the front, you're not seeing the whole thing. So you wander around, and that's giving you more perspective on the whole piece of art. It's the same thing with art, with creating art or having a life. You can't look at the world by just saying, well, this is the one thing and it's only this way, because there are many different ways to get to the root of being a human. And that's important to me.
And also having the openness to understand that different people from different lived experiences have their own connection to source, and finding that we can find our own way and carve our own path, even taking in consideration how you were raised. I think a lot of people have a hard time divorcing themselves from narratives or things that they were taught when they were younger.
Sure.
I know specifically me growing up in Texas with evangelical Christianity, and people always ask me, how could I be affiliated with any church or be connected to any type of religion with, the stronghold that evangelical Christianity has on America and the legislation that is being passed through a very specific agenda. And what I've always said is that I consider myself a person that connects to source. That original connection was through evangelical Christianity. But now that I've grown in my understanding of life and of people, I think that you can connect to source however you want, as long as you're centered and grounded in love and seeing people. So that was my original gateway.
Yeah.
But I have friends that are Muslim, friends that are Jewish, friends that are all over the place. And that's also why I created this platform, right?
Sure.
So I can learn and grow. And do I understand and know everything about all those lived experiences?
No.
I don't, but I honor them.
Right.
And I see them. And if you're moving through life and you're making people's lives better, and you understand your place in this bigger picture, then you're already getting it right.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also it's when you start to travel, getting back to, this whole thing, when I was in somewhere outside of Kyoto or Osaka in Japan, and I was, I can't remember what, it was some kind of shrine on the water, on the sea. And I happened to be there on a day where there was a Shinto wedding. And I had never in my life seen something so beautiful. It was completely silent with these kind of musicians playing some things. And if you've ever seen a Japanese tea ceremony, it's very austere and quiet and spiritual in and of itself, just to serve tea. And that moment was the kind of thing where I was like, I am experiencing a side of humanity that I've never seen before, but I'm taking that and putting that in the box. And each place that I've been to, I take a little bit of that culture and put it in my, I now see humanity, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, because instead of being at my Applebee's, because that's the only place that I go, because I don't go anywhere, I now have the world in my pocket, and I see humanity for the deeper thing that it is. And it's also because when you start talking to people outside of the politics, outside of religion, just about being a person, the commonality is so profound that you literally go back to your hotel or back on a plane and go home and you're like, oh my word, this is so close to who I am, because they actually exist in a way that makes sense to me.
I want to ask you one final question about like just process and going back to theater and the world of adapting things. Because right, you've been a part of a lot of adaptions that have lived as one thing and now become something else. And that's a very specific skill, especially when you're like dealing with these iconic IPs like Preacher's Wife, Legally Blonde. People like love these films. Do you feel a pressure to like live up to an expectation that would be different if you were developing a new musical?
Yes and no. I think that with in the right hands, with the right writers, an adaptation can be something that really gets an audience jazzed. Like, it's really the kind of thing where an adaptation, when it's done correctly, makes you look at a property that you've seen before, like I was talking about with the sculpture. Like, you're now looking at it from the left, or you're now looking at it from the right, instead of dead ahead. When you read a book, you're constantly conjuring images. So when that gets made into a movie or a play, you're like, well, I mean, this is how I envision it. So you have a thing in your head, and so it becomes very difficult to know that you're going to touch a lot of people who have that idea. And turning a film into a play right now, or stage production, is increasingly hard, especially because the commerce of it makes sense to the studios that own the properties. But it puts the pressure on the writers to make it worthwhile enough for people to see it in a different light. And I think that I much prefer doing, you know, original musicals, but the adaptations that I've done well, technically 5. And out of those 5, 6. And out of those 6, I'm just going through. I'm like, oh, I've done a lot more than that.
You've done a lot.
But then the original stuff that I've done, it's just as joyful for me. It's just a different thing because it's a blank slate, and you could be like, okay, like we could do it. There are no expectations other than the expectations of the team and the people who are supporting that team to make something great. With the adaptation, the pressure's on because the property has to own enough or hold enough weight for an audience to come in and go, okay, I'm ready to experience this story in a different way. One of the things that makes, I think, Legally Blonde something that has been very influential to your generation and the generation behind you is that, first of all, being on MTV was like a thing, and you could see it now on YouTube, and that's a thing. But I think also it's different from the movie because the way it's been crafted by all of us who were on that team, we looked at it and thought, there's more layers to mine here. There's a deeper thing to go here, and you can only get to that in the theater. Or you can only get to that with musical theater. And so that's kind of like, you know, where I think the adaptation versus new thing is. I don't think it's any harder to do either. I just think the expectations are on different planes.
Yeah. So I ask every guest this, and this is a big question, so if you need to sit with it for a second before you answer, you can. If you had a wish for the world right now in this moment, what would it be?
I think it's best summed up with the kind of overarching dictum of Judaism, which is tikkun olam. Tikkun olam is a Hebrew phrase that means heal the world. It is the purpose of being on this planet. It is the reason that we are here, not just as Jews, but as people. But it is a strict order in my upbringing and in my religious teachings that tikkun olam is first and foremost the reason for living. You must take the time in your life to heal the world. You must. There's nothing besides that. There's charity, there's tzedakah. Those two things are the most important thing in my life. That you must take time to figure out a way to heal the world, and you must give back. And sometimes it's not a financial give back. Sometimes it's just being able to kind of pay it forward with the things that I do, or the things that I've learned, like we're doing kind of right now.
Yeah.
But the healing the world part, that's the thing that I wish the most, is that the more people understand and find out about tikkun olam and what that means and how to kind of like take that first step on that journey, the more you realize that that is a great way to live your life. That you're constantly in service of trying to bring it together instead of pushing it apart. The divisiveness is, especially for those of us that grew up in a world where there was already divisiveness between communist and Western societies. When that went away, when it kind of dissipated in 1989, 1990, all of us in Gen X, because we were in our teens and 20s, we were like, here we go. It's a new world. And 30 years later, we're like, what did we do? Like, what has become of it? So how do we get back to the thing that we can heal the world? And that's my wish.
And I think a lot of people get overwhelmed with that task because they feel like they have to do it perfectly. But before we even started this interview, you gave me a gorgeous quote that you had gotten just 12 hours ago about it not having to be perfect. And go ahead and share that quote, and we'll leave them with that.
So I was watching some TV, and a program came on, and there was an interview, and blah, 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 and this person said, there's only one way to live life, and that's effort with sincerity. And that leveled me. And I was like, all you have to do is put one foot in front of the other, take that step, and live your life with an effort to get to be sincere. Do not fake it. Do not try and please other people. Have effort and make it effort with sincerity. And I think that that is just the most gorgeous way to live.
I can't top that. This has been an absolute pleasure. I'm so thankful for you, James.
I'm thankful for you. Thanks, pal.
Oh my God, just a true blessing. So y'all know that art has the power to bring people together. Art has the power to heal, and art has the power to transcend language. For those reasons alone, making art is a spiritual practice. So go make art everywhere. My name is Matthew Johnson Harris, and this was another episode of Art and Soul.